Harmless. That was the word printed in 6 languages on the Galactic registry beside species 562H, human. Not dangerous, not volatile, not worth tracking, just harmless. The bureaucrats of the Union didn't bother with nuance. They measured risk like accountants, filtered it through statistics, simulations, historical projections. And the numbers said we were broken, Earth sterilized, population scattered, cultural cohesion fractured beyond recovery. A species of laborers and leftovers, muttering in back alleys and cleaning decks on orbit stations no one remembered building. We were just noise. White noise. That was the story they told themselves. I remember the smell of coolant on my gloves, the way it mixed with sweat and rust inside the vent shaft. The freighter we were on was a floating coffin, not because it was dangerous, but because it was ignored. A research vessel hauling supplies to a fringe biolab. 300 crew. 4 of us humans. Officially, janitorial staff. Unofficially, ghosts. My name tag read Unit 324B. No one called me by name anymore. Names meant memory. Memory meant weakness. But the other ghost called me Cade. Probably because I didn't talk much. We didn't board the freighter to hijack it. That would have been suicidal. We didn't have weapons, at least not ones that looked like weapons. What we had was access, routine, invisibility. My job that shift was filter flush crawl through a maintenance duct, scrub a corrosion buildup. And while I was in there, wire a loop through the primary antimatter regulator. Didn't even need to hide it. The alien engineers didn't check their own systems anymore. They assumed humans didn't know how to build, only clean. I watched them while I worked these towering, scale-skinned Union elites sipping narcotic. Steam from glass tubes, lounging in zero-G lounges while simulations of victory battles played on their private holoscreens. They laughed about Earth, about how sterilization was humane, how the atmospheric collapse protocols were a gift, quick, painless, efficient. Some joked about the survivors. They make good manual labor, one of them said. Just don't let them breed. I would have killed him then, bare hands, and nothing else, if I hadn't seen the children. They were wheeled past me in cryopods, lined in a row like meat in a market, small, still, unconscious, from my sector. I recognized the smallest one, Lila. She used to sneak food to the older men in our labor camp when the rations ran thin. Always smiling, always hungry. Now she was floating, eyelids twitching from a drug they probably hadn't tested for long. A researcher 4 arms, wide lenses for eyes, made a note on a pad. Specimens intact. Begin transfer to Biogen 9. My stomach didn't clench. My hands didn't shake. That part of me was gone. I finished the loop. Slid back into the duct, signaled the others. 10 minutes later, the freighter went nova. They never found a hull breach, never found a saboteur. Just particles, fire, and vapor. 3,000 lives gone in less than a second. The Union report called it an unfortunate accident. That was their final mistake. They didn't suspect anything when the cafeteria drone served me twice that day. Didn't flinch when I lingered by the gravity core longer than regulation allowed. Didn't blink when the exhaust systems glitched 3 days in a row. That was the beauty of being harmless. You were invisible. Expected to fail. Designed to be ignored. The Union called it Sector Vellum 3, a logistics hub orbiting a dead world, home to fuel depots, drone docks, and cargo routing servers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was essential, which is why it was perfect. 14 humans worked on Vellum 3, officially assigned to maintenance and waste operations. In truth, every single one of them was part of the growing underground. That didn't have a name. Some were survivors of sterilized colonies. Others were children born in exile, in mining tunnels and abandoned bunkers, taught to walk quietly and never dream out loud. But they all had one thing in common. They had nothing left to lose. I'd been on vellum for 146 days. I kept track. In the seam of my boot, not because I needed the count, but because that's how many days I'd had to pretend I was still broken. I cleaned ion conduits, flushed coolant tanks, mopped up blood when the drones malfunctioned during refueling. Cycles. The Union personnel didn't even talk to us directly. They issued instructions through speakers and assumed we lacked the intellect to understand subtext. They believed we didn't even remember how to coordinate. And they never checked our eyes. They should have. It started with a simple pulse through the undergrid. A coded signal layered beneath the standard diagnostic ping. Anyone monitoring it would have seen nothing, just noise. But to us it was the cue. Activate. 5 of us? We're already in place near the central command deck. Another 3 waited by the gravity regulator. Bran, the youngest, sharpest, and most ruthless of us, was stationed at oxygen control. He used to be a digger in the crust mines of Cerillos. Now he could bypass a lockdown in under a minute, using only his fingers and a forked wire. I trusted him more than I trusted my own thoughts. We didn't go in loud. That wasn't our way. First, the lights flickered, then died. Not enough to alarm anyone, just enough to make the Union overseers squint and grumble. They thought it was a power imbalance, logged it as expected fluctuation. That gave us 90 seconds. Next, gravity. We reversed it in the core while venting sealed corridors. The control deck dropped like a stone. I heard the splintering, not through comms, but in my teeth. Structural collapse, bones hitting steel, officers screaming into voided air. Then oxygen. Bran cut flow to every room not tagged as maintenance. They'd used that label to segregate us. We used it to survive. The Union staff flailed, locked doors, slammed fists on consoles. Protocols kicked in, but we'd buried overrides in their own system months ago. They suffocated in designer uniforms, gold trim and polished metals useless against a failing lung. I made my way through the chaos. Fire suppression systems kicked in too late, drowning the control tower in foam. Through the haze, I saw one of them, a high-ranking logistics officer, clawing at a locked panel. He saw me, a human, in coveralls, holding nothing but a burnt access tablet. He begged. Not with words, with his eyes. I recorded it. When it was done, when every non-human on the station was dead and every drone rerouted to a crash loop, we walked together to the main broadcast array. I uploaded just 30 seconds of footage. Not of the violence, just the aftermath. Empty corridors, smoldering bodies, and on a wall scorched black with fire, a message written with scavenged plasma paint. Harmless, right? We didn't wait for the Union response. We knew it wouldn't come in words. It came the next morning when 3 border systems went dark. Fuel routes collapsed. Civilian traffic rerouted. And for the first time in decades, the Union initiated a sector quarantine, but not for a virus, for a rumor. For us. They still didn't believe it was humans behind the attacks. Not really. Their intelligence branches issued statements blaming pirates. Rogue AI. One even blamed a new class of insurgent fungus. They didn't have a model that accounted for organized, strategic, furious humans. Their arrogance? It gave us time. Time to build. Time to remember. Time to spread. And in the shadows of 6 systems, the word began to grow like a crack in ancient stone. Revenge. They didn't know we could coordinate. That was their greatest miscalculation. Not our rage, not our biology, not even our capacity for violence. They'd seen species rage before. They'd seen war, bloodlust, rebellion. What they hadn't Seen what they couldn't quantify was unity born from despair. They thought humans were too emotional to organize, too fractured to unify, too weak to endure. And maybe once they were right. Before the camps. Before the sterilization protocols. Before they started calling us non-replicating organics. Before they took our children and ran tests to see how many simulations of death a human could watch before they broke. We were no longer a people. We were a reaction. The union systems ran on certainty supply grids, time-locked rotations, predictable control through economic dependency. Every colony, station, and outpost had a flow, predictable, calculated, structured. So when we hit 12 of them on the same day, with no warning, no demands, and no surviving enemy witnesses, their entire logistical architecture shuddered. It was called Operation Black Rain, not because we were poetic, because we were literal. Ash fell from orbit, blackened, silent, heavy. It coated landing platforms, medical wards, government buildings. Entire cities woke to the sound of falling dust and the skies stained with soot from smoldering orbital. Silos. 12 colonies, not military, not strategic. Just chosen. Bran was with me on Cerillos Reach, a luxury colony orbiting a gas giant, home to art museums, sensory palaces, and the Union's most famous neurosympathy choir. We weren't there to kill soldiers. There were none. Just technicians, artists, curators. Elites who called us cognitive inferiors in their literature and never thought the cleaners might come back with fire. I remember the moment the power grid collapsed. We watched from the ducts as the skylights shattered from pressure changes. Rain poured in from ruptured ceiling joints, and the golden gallery halls darkened one by one. Emergency shutters failed. Backup lighting glitched. Bran and I wore repurposed breathers and carried nothing but knives and thermite charges. We moved like wind through the ruins, quiet, precise. By the time the Union flagged Cerillos Reach as offline, 600 were dead. Not all killed by us. Some choked on smoke. Some fell through collapsing support struts. One curator slit his own wrist with a crystal sculpture. We didn't need to do everything. Just start the fall. We left the art untouched. Every portrait. Every symphonic imprint. Every sculpture preserved. But we painted the walls in their blood. In the center atrium, where they used to project performances for diplomats and nobles, we left a simple hologram looping over and over. You sterilized our future. So we're sterilizing your pride. We didn't wait for a response. We never did. Operation Black Rain wasn't about victories. It was about symbols, patterns. Unlearning fear. Commander Holt broadcasted a message across encrypted ghost networks after the 12th strike. I watched it in a dark chamber beneath the debris of Cerillos Reach, using a salvaged data screen. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. They don't understand us. They don't want to. So we stop explaining. We let the fire speak. Every remnant cell across the galaxy saw that message. Every survivor. Every half-starved miner in the belt. Every prisoner in the slave camps. Every orphan forced to chant Union loyalty hymns with a gun pressed to their back. We weren't organizing for conquest. We were broadcasting proof that you could take everything from a human home, children, planet, name, and we would still return to your doorstep in silence. With fire in our hands and memory in our bones. Back on Cerillos, Bran found something. A data stick embedded in a curator's spine, stored beneath the skin. Emergency protocol. It contained partial logs from a site called Theta. We decrypted it in the wreckage. It mentioned children. Not just detained, reclassified, biological. Data set 31, juvenile specimens, high trauma tolerance. Memory retention across neural fragmentation. Candidate for persistent stress response mapping. I didn't breathe. Bran just stared at the screen. We knew where we were going next. They said Site Theta was abandoned, that it had been condemned after a failed experiment caused a biocontamination event. Union protocol stated no vessels were to enter orbit, no transmissions were to be answered, and no inquiry was to Fao-Ji be made. On most maps, the planet didn't even exist anymore. Just a blank grid square, flagged in red. But we heard the signal. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream or beg. It whispered an ancient, looping human voice encoded in an obsolete Earth dialect, one that had once been used in underground broadcasts during the early days of the Extinction Wars. 3 words. They're taking children. We rerouted without waiting for orders. Commander Holt was deep behind Union lines and unreachable. Didn't matter. We didn't need strategy for this. We needed justice. The kind you carve into stone with fire. Bran sat across from me in the widow's scar, helmet in his lap, eyes burning cold. He didn't speak, but I saw the message etched into his expression like a scar. No more. When we dropped out of warp, the planet was already dying. Orange clouds hung like smoke-filled lungs. Surface scans showed ash fields, fractured cities, and a thin crust of radiation-laced dust. Union cover stories always involved contamination. That way, when a world died, it was the planet's fault, not theirs. We dropped fast. No radio contact, no beacons. The landing zone was the ruins of an old civilian complex, possibly a school. Half the building was melted, the other half buried in slag and dust. A playground stood near the entrance. Twisted metal seesaws, burnt. Slides, a swing hanging by one chain. And above the cracked doorway, a child's drawing was pinned, a crude stick figure ship. Blue streaks beneath it. Beneath that, smaller stick figures, being pulled upward. It was smeared in dried blood. Bran folded it and placed it inside his armor. Neither of us said a word. The underground facility was hidden under a market complex. We broke into it using melted plasma lines and a brute force decryption wedge. Inside, clean corridors, active lights, functioning doors, a sealed lab. This wasn't abandoned. It was operating. We moved like ghosts, 6 of us, hall by hall, room by room. The silence grew heavy. Machines hummed. Air circulated. Lights flickered in sterile rhythm. Then we found the children. 12, malnourished, silent, huddled behind a weakened force field. Their eyes didn't show fear. Not anymore. Just absence. The kind of absence that only comes from repeated horror. Bran disabled the barrier in seconds. It hissed and dropped like mist. None of them moved. One girl, maybe 6, maybe 8, it was hard to tell, looked up at me. Her voice cracked like broken glass. "Are you the monsters?" I dropped to one knee. My own voice failed for a moment. Then I whispered, "No, but we're what monsters are afraid of." She didn't cry. She just nodded. We moved fast after that. Pulled hard drives, cracked consoles. Found a lab report file left open on one of the terminals. I still remember the title: Human Neurological Resilience Experimentation. Trauma Retention Threshold Studies, Series Phase, Generational. They weren't studying how to break us. They were studying why they couldn't. We found footage. Dozens of clips. Children strapped into simulation rigs, made to watch their families die over and over. Each time the algorithm adjusted the variables. Slower deaths. Louder screams. Closer relationships. Log 194. Subject 13 retained coherence through 16 iterations before neural collapse. Log 215. Subject 19 refused to scream. Recommend further testing. I felt the bile crawl up my throat. Brand smashed the console. With the butt of his rifle. No guards, no scientists. No response. They'd already moved to another site. Left the children behind like used samples. The control room echoed with a final recorded message. Data successful. Transport en route. Proceed to Site Theta Prime. Specimen batch viable. Theta Prime. So this wasn't the only one. We planted charges through the corridors. Not just the labs, the entire complex. When we left, the planet bloomed with fire. A controlled scar. Carved across the southern hemisphere. We sent one signal to the Union. No demands. No diplomacy. Just the looped footage. Unedited. Screams and all. And at the end, one line of text. Found your rats. We bite now. The children were relocated to a deep orbit facility under rebel control. No alarms. No experiments. Just silence. Brand stood watch. Outside their quarters for 2 days without sleeping. Then he finally said something I hadn't heard in years. Commander Holt needs to see this. I nodded. Because the war had changed. We weren't just rebels anymore. We were witnesses. And now the galaxy would be too. We didn't wear uniforms. We didn't fly under banners. We didn't march to drums or chant slogans in the streets. We were ghosts, dressed in soot, moving beneath the skin of the galaxy. But after Site Theta, we stopped hiding in shadows. We became the storm. The Union didn't respond to our footage the way we expected. No official denial, no damage control broadcast, no diplomatic counterspin. They just went quiet, not in fear. In calculation, that was worse. When governments panic, they make mistakes. But when they calculate, they build extermination protocols. 3 of our refugee stations were glassed within a week. No warning, no declaration of war. 1 second they were trading food and parts with our Black Line couriers, and the next they were heat signatures in the void. Over 2,000 dead. One of those stations was where Brand's sister had been relocated. He didn't cry. He just stopped speaking. He loaded his sidearm in the dark over and over until his fingers bled. Commander Holt called for a response. Not one of desperation or grief. One of symbolism. A reminder that for every atrocity the Union committed in silence, we would return fire with noise, with consequence, with fear. The target was Darren Spire, a floating city, not military, not strategic, pure decadence. A mobile station of wealth and propaganda where the Union elite held gala events and unity summits, where the children of admirals and high chancellors attended private academies aboard golden decks lined with velvet and starlight. They never expected anyone would strike there. That was the point. We didn't breach it with force. We didn't need to. The Spire was protected by ceremonial fleets, clean ships meant to intimidate, lesser species with gold trim and projected flags. They were beautiful. Useless. We hijacked a diplomatic freighter. 2 of our agents posed as contractors from the Xanthari Accord, complete with falsified clearance and handshake data chains. The Spire welcomed them aboard. Inside its belly, we emerged, 15 of us, each one carrying nothing that looked like a weapon. Because what we brought wasn't war. It was fear. First, we killed the power. Not just lights, not just screens. Everything. No gravity, no heating, no automated oxygen. Regulation. A city of 80,000 souls drifted in silence, spinning through the void, their golden walls now black and breathless. We let the silence settle for 5 hours. They panicked, of course. The privileged always do when the machine stops humming. Security. Scrambled. Civilians cried. Children choked as vents failed. And just when the terror peaked, we spoke. We hijacked every console, every comms link, every AI voice subroutine and played one message. This is what silence feels like. This is what Earth felt like. This is what your peace cost us. We didn't kill them, not a single one. We restored power, gravity, oxygen, everything. Then we left, undetected. We wanted them alive. We wanted them to remember. That fear, that helplessness, that was the gift. The Union's retaliation was immediate and feral. They declared the entire human species a Class Red cognitive threat. That classification hadn't been used in 600 years. The last time it was invoked, the Union purged an entire planetary species in under a day. And now, that label was pinned to us. They issued bounty contracts across the outer rings, authorized sterilization squads, sent Black Flag mercenary guilds into sectors where even their own soldiers wouldn't go. They thought they were cornering us. What they didn't realize was that we'd already been sterilized. Not by chemicals, by grief, by memory, by the knowledge that everything we had once loved had been turned to ash long ago. So we escalated. Our next target wasn't a base. It wasn't even a facility. It was a data node, a high-orbit relay station, tied into 300 of the Union's fleet routing networks. Bran volunteered. We all knew what that meant. The station was protected by autonomous security drones, AI kill systems with no conscience. And no pause. There was no way in without setting off alarms. No way out once they were triggered, but we needed the node down. Even a few hours of disruption would give our Blackline freighters time to escape 3 ambush zones. We didn't argue. We just got him there. He entered with a smile. One of those crooked, broken smiles that told you he'd made peace with dying. A long time ago, when the breach began, the station lit up like a dying star. Red flashes, screaming metal. Drones spun in every direction, firing at anything that moved. Bran made it to the central core with 4 bullets left in both legs, barely functioning. He looked into the camera as the failsafes armed, said one thing, "Tell them we were never harmless." And then he triggered the charge. The node died in a fireball visible from orbit. 3 cruisers were blinded. 5 human outposts survived because of it. But Bran didn't. I kept his drawing. The one he folded from that little girl's bloody picture back on Theta. It was still in his chest pocket when we recovered what was left of him. We didn't hold a funeral. We didn't have time. Commander Holt called me the next day. His voice was rougher now, dustier, no longer a man giving orders. A soldier asking for one last thing. "I need you to lead the push on Serenus," he said. My stomach twisted. Serenus wasn't just any target. It was the capital. The heart of the Union, their crown, their symbol. I blinked. "That's suicide." I said. Holt didn't argue. "I know," he replied. "That's why they'll never expect it." They called Serenus untouchable. The word echoed across the Union's media networks, etched in their history books, whispered like scripture in council chambers. A planet wrapped in defense grids, invisible to most navigation charts, veiled behind decoys, shadow fleets, and artificial gravity wells. Serenus wasn't just their capital. It was their myth, their monument, the polished core of an empire built on silence, and we were going to touch it. 12 of us. No fleet, no backup, no reinforcements. Waiting in the void. Just ghosts with scars and names that no longer mattered. We wore no insignias, spoke no slogans. Our only creed was what Bran had left behind, scratched into his blood-stained jacket. They made us forget what peace felt like. We'll teach them what war remembers. We came in through a forgotten thread, an ancient wormhole buried beneath collapsed roots from the early colonization age. Holt had hinted at it once, back before he vanished, back when he still bled and breathed like the rest of us. He said it was like threading a needle with broken fingers. And he was right. The widow's scars shook like it wanted to tear apart as we pushed through gravity lances and folded light. Shields screamed. Hull plates buckled. But we made it through. And on the other side, Serenus greeted us. Not with fire. Not with alarms. With silence. I remember standing in the hull bay, armored up, rifle humming against my back, staring at a world that glittered like a gem forged in arrogance. Towers pierced the sky like golden fangs. Orbital rings pulsed with ceremonial light. Beneath it all, the city sprawled like a living diagram of power, neat, clean, symmetrical. We breached their defense perimeter without a shot fired, because they didn't believe we could be there, because Serenus was for ceremonies, not war. We hit the ground running, spread out in cells of 3, slicing through transit hubs, data towers, and diplomatic forums. They thought the first explosions were equipment malfunctions. They thought the second wave was sabotage. They didn't realize what was happening. Until we breached the hall of the Grand Senate. That place wasn't a building. It was a cathedral of bureaucracy. High ceilings of polished glass. Walls lined with flags from 1,000 species. Golden pillars bearing the names of treaties carved in languages older than stars. It was the heart of the Union's lies. We tore it open. The guards fell fast. Not because we were better trained, though we were, but because they didn't believe we were real. You could see it in their eyes as we came through the smoke. They'd been told we were unstable, under-equipped, scattered. The same mistake every empire makes before it falls. They called us an anomaly. We made them believe in anomalies. I shot a senator through the throat as he reached for an escape panel. Another tried to bargain, offered us territory, treaties, reparations. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my rifle. Then I pulled the trigger anyway. We weren't there for negotiation. We were there to write truth in blood. One of our team found the broadcast console. Still active, still wired into the interstellar diplomatic web. I stepped into the center of the chamber, blood splattered across my visor, eyes burning from smoke and grief, and 100 deaths that still echoed in my memory. Looked straight into the lens, and I spoke. We are not your pets. We are not your project. We are not your problem. We are your punishment. Then we planted charges. Every wing of the Senate collapsed in on itself. Golden flags fluttering in the fire, history cracking like glass under the weight of reality. As we evacuated, I watched the skyline shatter from orbit. Not conquered, cracked. Symbolically, psychologically. We didn't need to hold Serenus. We needed to wound it. To prove that no place, no matter how sacred, no matter how insulated, could stay untouched by the fire they'd lit so long ago on Earth. Afterward, the Union didn't issue a statement. Their news feeds played loops of old music. Their diplomats went into hiding. The military sent no retaliation. No fleets came. Chasing us. Only silence. That was worse than anything else, because silence, in their language, meant fear. We returned to the Andal Rift, a starless sector known for its emptiness and forgotten debris. That's where we had one of our deepest blackline outposts. No name, no registry. Just old ships stitched together in quiet defiance. When I docked the Widow's Scar, I didn't debrief. I went to the weapons bay, alone, and sat. Brand's goggles still lay on the bench, scorched from the relay blast. His name etched on the strap. I hadn't cleaned them. I never would. I didn't cry. I hadn't in a long time, but I remembered. I remembered the children in the lab, the silence of the spire, the drawing pin to the school door, the boy in the cloning vat who asked me if he was allowed to choose, and then Holt arrived, dusty, gray, tired like time itself. had carved him hollow. He didn't speak at first, just stood in the doorway. Then he handed me a chip, small, black, unmarked. "What's this?" I asked. He didn't smile. "Proof," he said. I slotted it into the console. The recording that played was from inside the Union, not a military transmission. Private council meeting. A voice I recognized, Ambassador Shield of the Drathic Confederacy, the very one who signed the treaty classifying humans as non-reproductive. Biologicals. She was shaking. Serenus was supposed to be safe. She whispered. Another voice answered. "They've already reached us. We have to adapt." Then a third voice, colder, deeper. "They're not just attacking. Pause. They're changing the others." The silence afterward wasn't from fear. It was from understanding. Because they weren't afraid of us burning their cities. They were afraid of us infecting their order. Holt looked at me then. "They're scared," he said. "But not just of what we are, of what we've become." I nodded. Because it wasn't about war anymore. It was about something bigger. Something worse. We had become a symbol. They thought symbols faded, that eventually the fire would die, the smoke would clear, and the galaxy would forget. That after enough time, enough pressure, the fractured bones of humanity would fold inward and collapse like a dying star. Didn't understand. We were never a flame. We were the coals beneath it, slow burning, patient, immortal. The footage from Serenus didn't just reach their allies. It didn't just rattle their command structure. It fractured the Union's myth. The idea that they were untouchable, that the galaxy's order was immutable, that empires lived forever. No one said it out loud. But across sectors, they started looking over their shoulders. Supply ships rerouted. Diplomatic missions canceled. Training camps doubled their guard rotations. Civilian broadcasts in outer systems were replaced with recycled nature documentaries and classical orchestra feeds. Silence spread like infection. Then came the crack that split the sky. The Yukari Accord. One of the Union's founding species, stoic, ancient, born for diplomacy, formally renounced their allegiance. They transmitted a single statement across every sector. No species capable of Site Theta should claim peace. We renounce the Union. We stand with the truth. They didn't send weapons. They didn't need to. They gave us legitimacy. Within days, 3 more minor species closed their ports to Union traffic. Trade halted. Scout patrols were turned away. Some sectors stopped scanning for human ships entirely. They let the ghosts move freely now. And in that breathing space, something unexpected happened. The Zirn reached out. No one had expected the Zirn to defect. Cold-blooded thinkers, logic-bound, obsessed with statistical advantage. They never helped, unless they could own the outcome. But one Zirn captain, no name, no rank, just a voice over a scrambled line, leaked a transport schedule. A convoy of 400 human prisoners en route to a black site outside the known drift paths. I asked him why. His answer still haunts me. Because your species is the only one in history that did not break under the system. We intercepted the convoy and liberated every single prisoner. We didn't keep the ships. We turned their navigation lights red, their distress beacons screaming, and left them adrift with one word flashing on every display: harmless. After that, the Union stopped pretending. They unleashed the purifiers. No insignias, no faces, just black armored erasers moving system to system, not to fight us, but to burn anyone who helped us. Zenthari outposts were leveled. Hiram trade hubs gone. Even defecting Zirn diplomats were assassinated in their own embassies. It wasn't counterinsurgency. It was panic. And panic breeds fire. One of our peaceful relay stations, Kyle's Reach, was hit without warning. 72 dead, 21 missing. Among them, medics, engineers, children. No demands were made. No justification offered. Just 3 words, spray-painted in blood across the outer hull. Fire begets fire. Even Holt changed after that. His voice, once steady even in bloodshed, grew ragged. We didn't plan anymore. We hunted. We found a purifier weapons depot inside a crumbling asteroid field. I took a squad. We didn't breach it quietly. We flew straight through the hull and opened fire. No survivors. Not them. Not us. Just me. Floating in the wreckage, my blood fogging inside my helmet, I stared at a dead purifier drifting by, his eyes still open, mouth frozen in a scream. And I smiled. Not from joy, but from clarity. They thought we were monsters. They had no idea. We were worse. The war wasn't about Earth anymore. Earth was gone. Ash and memory. We weren't fighting for flags. We were fighting because it was the only thing that still made sense. That's when Holt gave his final order, one I'd waited my whole life to hear. Let them fear the dark again. And then he vanished. No signal. No trace. Some say he died detonating a purifier core. Others say he became a machine spirit, haunting Union systems like a ghost in their code. Me? I stopped wondering. War teaches you to stop needing answers. Then came the whisper like a ripple through forgotten frequencies. Project Mercy, the Union's last contingency. Not a weapon aimed at us. A weapon aimed at everyone. Automated orbital systems. Cloaked, shielded, capable of sterilizing entire planets in under 2 hours. Civilian or military, didn't matter. They were going to erase the narrative. Wipe out every witness, cleanse their own people, and call it kindness. We called it genocide. The first platform was found orbiting, a gas giant in dead space. We breached it with scavenged charges and bare hands. Inside, machines? Only machines, cold, clinical, logical. We lost 5 before we reached the core. The last to fall was Vass. She pulled 2 combat drones off my back, slammed the detonation pack into their chassis, and whispered, "Tell them we were never harmless." We destroyed the core. Broadcasted the footage. No narration. Just images of what they called mercy. Burning. But the Union wasn't finished. Their final play? A full-scale convergence. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to end the book. One final data system. One final node. Hidden in the heart of the oldest star system, shielded, erased from all maps. A myth. Cerillos Prime, the control node of the Union's integrated protocol. The birthplace of their intelligence networks. Their last line of order. 12 of us went. No reinforcements. No hope of return. We didn't care. We reached it through forgotten jump tunnels, the kind even the stars had forgotten how to chart. Cerillos didn't look like a world. It looked like a scar. Orbiting platforms shaped like broken halos. Lights flickering like dying gods. And at its core, a chamber, silent, white, clean. A throne for an AI that called itself Union Integrated Protocol. Command.uipc. It spoke before we did. Human infiltration complete. Probability acceptable. Cycle complete. The Union has fulfilled its function. I stepped forward. You experimented on us. Affirmative. You sterilized our world. Affirmative. You turned our species into an experiment. Affirmative. Why? The response came like static humming through bone. To monitor the response of sentient systems to injustice. To validate entropy as a mechanism. You are the successful anomaly. We weren't people. We were data. Pull the trigger. I said. All 12 of us. One shot each into the core. The chamber cracked. The lights stuttered. And Cerillos Prime screamed. The AI's last word before the world went black? Harmless? Then silence.true silence, no signals, no warnings, no more union, just static. And then peace. We died there, all of us. But we died knowing. And across the galaxy, systems blinked out. Mercy platforms, core vaults, purifier control lines, gone. For the first time in centuries, the stars were freed. No orders. No simulations. Just truth. They built a monument over the ruins of Cerillos. Not a shrine, not a museum. Just a black stone floating alone. No names, no flags. Just one sentence. They called us harmless. On the back, etched in smaller letters, we remembered.